So you know it's not a crime to be fascinated by all things criminal. And if you do like delving into the underworld, why not join us for a special live show on March 27th at the Cork Opera House. We'll be talking about the making of a cartel and all the wild and crazy stories that happened along the way. So why not join us for this special live show? Tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie. Stephen, this story in Spain and Alicante, which broke last year, is just absolutely incredible. New developments over there. Now, we're talking about the murder of John George. There's been 2 suspects, but one of them, you broke a story on last week on Wednesday night, shortly after 9 o'clock, that one of them has actually been shot dead.
Incredible, yes. Hi, Nicola. Yes, one of the suspects is a guy, Czech national called Michael Maly. He was 33 years old. And he's one of the guys, along with the Navy man, Johnny Smyth, who is charged, not charged, but linked to the murder of John George.
They're kind of before the courts as suspects, isn't that the case?
I think it's different in Spain, isn't it? They're not charged. They basically build a case around it and then they go to trial. That's what's supposed to happen. But Mr. Maly, I got a tip off on Wednesday night about 9 o'clock that he'd actually been, it was Tuesday night, that he was murdered over the weekend. And that has proven to be the case. He was shot dead at some sort of near a beach in the Torrevieja, not that far away from where John George was last seen. Had visited a house there.
And this is looking as if it's a professional hit. It's an assassination.
Yeah, well, it was 1:30 in the morning. Somebody had just found him lying there with blood pouring from his head, and I think he was dead. Paramedics came and tried to resuscitate him, but had no luck. He was dead. He was dead, shot dead.
Let's go back a bit. And I said in the beginning of this podcast, it was last year. It was actually December of 2024. So we're talking really now. We're coming into sort of 15, 16 months
years
ago.
But but a year and a few months. Yeah.
So tell us about what happened and who John George was.
Okay, so John George was a Belfast man, father of 2. He was 37 years old. He'd been involved in a bit of crime over here and had been in trouble with the courts. Was over in Spain. I think he was addicted. There was no secret that he liked taking drugs. He was maybe a bit of a drug addict, and he was out there supposedly on a holiday, but. He went missing around the middle of December. I can't remember the exact date. I'm going to guess, I think the 14th or maybe something like that. I think he maybe had a phone call with his dad. Said he had flights booked and he was going to come home, and then never appeared. And it was about 3 weeks later that his naked body was found underneath a lemon tree somewhere in the Rojales area. It's not an area of Spain I know, but I think that's right, Rojales, the area of Spain he was found, where he had been stabbed in the legs to disable him before being shot dead. So absolutely shocking. Terrible way to be for you to.
Now, in the meantime, between him going missing, because the family were expecting him home, and when he didn't get that flight or appear back, they kind of en masse travelled out to Alicante on the Costa Blanca, and they started to campaign for the police to take this really seriously. They knew from the beginning that something really bad had happened.
Yes, from recollection, they knew almost straight away that they thought he'd been murdered. So they were going out there to try and find him. I think they knew they were going out to look for a body. They weren't expecting him to be found alive for whatever reason, whatever information they had received themselves. They knew that he'd been murdered. So pretty grim, and it was obviously a horrendous 3-week period when they were just desperately, they just wanted him to find him to give him bring him home and give him a peaceful burial.
And they rightly so kicked up a fuss out there in order to drum up media attention, in order to kind of get the police out there to take this as seriously as they were. Now, Maly, is that Michael Maly, was one of 2 people identified as having been, with John George in his company, etc. Is it true to say that Maly was the one who may have brought the police to that area, to that lemon tree, and under which the John George's remains were found.
That has certainly been reported, and I mean, now, he didn't initially do that, but yes, eventually he, for whatever reason, he went to the police, or he with the family, and he took the family or police to where John George's body was, and it has been reported then he was obviously then a suspect in the murder, but he was out on bail. And it's been reported that he was helping the police with the case, helping the family, helping the police with the case to bring the other suspect, Johnny Smyth, to justice.
Yes. And that he could have possibly been a witness as well as somebody who was suspected himself, which makes his murder even more murky. Johnny Smyth
absolutely.
and his partner have been behaving in a very chaotic way. They've been playing out a lifestyle on social media. Tell me a little bit about them. Courtney, is it Courtney Smyth is his partner?
No,
Madison.
sorry, Courtney. Madison, yes. No, sorry, Courtney is John George's sister.
Okay.
Who's been on, has been on social media talking about the murder of Michael Maly and how, they basically, the family have no feelings towards this guy. They don't, whether they're not happy, they're not sad that he's dead. It's just, it is what it is. They've been told that the case will continue regardless, that he's not there, no longer there to give evidence, even if we're not sure if he actually was going to give evidence, but the other side of it is Johnny Smyth. Yes, his lawyers have argued that when Johnny Smyth has told us himself that he had no involvement in the John George murder, he had nothing to do with it. It was he's happy to get this all cleared up now. The other side is that his family and the police the court seem to think that that's not the case. So we're heading towards a trial at some point, and I suppose that one of these things will be proven correct, so he'll get his chance.
Johnny Smyth is, again, a Belfast man?
From Newton Abbey, just outside Belfast, outskirts of Belfast, yeah.
Okay, and has he been living out in Alicante for a period of time?
I think he has, yeah. He had a gym over in Newton Abbey that was actually, it was burned out through some sort of crime gangland dispute. So there's been stuff going on, but he was living out in Spain. Him and his partner Madison Allen, as she was then. And since the murder, when they went on the run, they actually got married in Gibraltar, sneaked across the Spanish border, got married, and before he was then extradited back from Portugal, where he was sort of hiding, back to Spain. He was held
extradited back as a suspect, as opposed to somebody charged with murder. So, in other words, when you remain before the courts in Spain as a suspect while the magistrate investigates the case, you likely have to look for an application to leave the jurisdiction, your passport, you'd have to sign on. And so you're essentially on a kind of a bail, even though you're just a suspect?
Yeah. I mean, he hadn't. I think this is before he was even brought to court. He sort of did a runner to Portugal with Madison. They got married, and when they were tracked down, and he was brought back to Spain, where he was held in a prison, a pretty open prison, for I think maybe 6 months. I think it was around 6 months time that he was held, but he in December managed to get bail of €100,000. And was able to get bail because they were evidence that was producing that they believe will clear him. It was linking more to Michael Maly, because they found in Michael Maly's car number plates which had blood on them. It took them months to get the tests, and I think Johnny Smith's lawyers were really pushing for them to finally find out what was on, whose blood was this, and it turned out they say that it is John George's blood on Michael Maly's number plates. I think Maly's case had always been, he tried to tell the police he didn't really know John George. He only knew him because he was friends with Johnny Smyth, and Johnny Smith's lawyers are saying that, well, that's not true. You knew him a lot better than you're letting on. So, like I say, when it comes to court, I suppose these things will come out. So
but Johnny Smyth and Madison Allen now Smith have been posting a lot on their, is it TikTok, and she's an OnlyFans creator.
She had an OnlyFans account, yes. And
they're sort of showing this sort of pretty extravagant and chaotic lifestyle that continues despite all this in the background. She was recently involved in a car crash in which a man, an expat from the UK, was
British
killed.
man, in his 50s, was died in an accident with a Nissan Qashqai on the whatever road it was. They were must have. I think it was a number of people in the car injured, and this man, lost his life. So I don't think she's been charged with anything, but obviously that's still under investigation. So
and she was told she was sort of banned from social media.
Well, I read that, but I've been told that there was no court ban, but I don't know. Yeah,
maybe she was advised to stay off it, but she doesn't nonetheless.
Yeah, no, there's no. It's been quite an 18 months for her and her now husband, hasn't it? It's just been a crazy way to live.
Crazy way to live. I mean, such, goings on, and the fact that now a possible witness and suspect in the murder has been murdered himself. Our colleague Alison Morris has just been posting some details in relation to that. She says a hitman from Liverpool is one of the main suspects in the murder of Michael Maly. And she says that she says the alarm was raised as regards to his murder at around 1:30 a.m. on Sunday in the Punta Prima beach area. After a local person just simply found him lying on the ground with head wounds. She said paramedics were called, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. Alison has also written that investigators are reporting to a judge based at court number 2 in Torrevieja. That's the same judge probing the murder of John George, who was shot in December of 2024. So this gunman for hire has been identified by local investigators. He's believed to be from the Liverpool area, and he was previously sort of suspected of being involved in an attempted murder of a Merseyside gangster last year. There's a lot of these characters that float around the Costa Blanca and the Costa del Sol, where a lot of gangsters live and a lot of criminal activity goes on. Incredibly, Torrevieja and Alicante was, at the same time John George was murdered in December of 2024. John Gilligan was picked up in a pink cocaine lab, and he is currently before the courts in relation to that. Not great for tourism, I imagine.
No, yeah,
and certainly not the murders.
I read that there's quite ironic that a right wing party in Spain is keen to get all these foreign criminals should be deported, so sent back to Ireland and the UK because they're just fed up with the murders and the guns and the drugs and the violence and a lot of burglaries. There's an awful lot of burglaries in that area, house break-ins and stuff. So
there would be a lot of holiday homes probably vacant for amounts of the year and stuff like that. I know that I had heard before that there was a lot of kind of, those involved in the fringes of criminality can identify houses that are vacant and they will often just move in, not pay rents. Wow. And so there's all these kind of problems there as well. But I mean, this is beyond and excessive to that. We'll come back to this story. I mean, between yourself, Stephen, and our colleague Alison Morris, you're piecing together what has happened and what is suspected around this. So for the moment, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anytime.
If you're a crimeworld.com subscriber, you've probably already binged on our latest exclusive podcast series, The Regency 10 Years On, from the hit that changed Gangland forever. This 6-part anniversary special revisits that fateful day when David Byrne was shot dead at the Northside Hotel, igniting a bloody feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, one of the deadliest rivalries in Irish history. Here's a taste of the new series, exclusive to crimeworld.com subscribers. So that Friday was one of those really quiet days. I mean, we all knew that Daniel Kinahan was in Dublin for the Clash of the Clans boxing weigh-in. At least we knew he was due into Dublin the next day. That Clash of the Clans bout match had been heavily advertised. But the day itself there was just little going on.
So there was very little happening that day. It's February. It's kind of a quiet enough time for news in general. And Alan Cherry and Ernie Leslie were on the road. They were at another story actually in Finglas.
What was that? Do you remember?
Well, it was one of these classic sort of district court stories where a guy had, I think some teenagers had thrown stones at his car and he got out and slapped the teenager. Always great kind of human stories, because some people feel sorry for the teenagers and some people don't. And so Alan had been out there, but the guy had moved on. He called out to his house to see if he wanted to talk. He'd moved on, he wasn't there. And we discussed going to the Regency earlier. And I said, look, just go along and see what happens, divert there. We obviously weren't expecting anything. And obviously that point of Alan being there would be the subject of conspiracy, but we'll get into that at a later point.
For sure. So it was a case really that day of, one thing hadn't worked out, so go to the next. But also there was definitely a general sense of, if we could be there, just in case.
Yes, and as you said, to see who was standing beside the Kinahans and who wasn't from that bigger organised crime group. So Alan and Ernie went out. I got a call. I think you got a call almost simultaneously, but I got a call from Alan. I'd spoken to him earlier on the day saying, see what happens. And he phoned me up and said, there's after being a shooting and I think we've got a picture. And I actually went, yeah, very funny. But of course, he stopped me and said, no, I'm serious. We're after, there's some guys come out with a gun, there's shots fired and there's total and utter chaos. And, I first thought is, get yourself safe. I have to admit, my second thought was, I hope they did get good pictures. But, you're still thinking they have to get safe. I mean, I know you probably got a similar call because Ernie and Alan obviously were in the same Jeep.
And of course, Ernie's the guy taking the photographs,
yes.
So he's on the phone to me. So I actually had gone for a pizza for lunch and I had come back over to the office and the phone rings and it was Ernie. And I answered and he was panicked on the other end of the phone. This was real high octane stuff. And he's still trying to take photos. He's trying to tell me what's happened. He's told me he thinks he's got a good one of one of the shooters as they were running from the scene. He was trying to call up the photograph on the back of his camera.
Yeah.
Because it would have taken him a while to get it onto a screen, but he'd also sent it into the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was kind of in the middle of doing a number of things. And as I was on the phone to him from memory, the photograph came into the office and we put it up on the big screen. And it was clear to see that this wasn't just one of the shooters as he suspected, but it was two. One of them was dressed as a woman.
Which is, of course, there was also this confusing story about guards coming in with weapons, and obviously we know now that they weren't ERU guys, they were guys dressed as them. But Alan was telling me this, there was talk of these guards, and then obviously there was, the crowd fleeing from the scene. So it was all confusing. But as you said, Ernie had taken a picture of the back of his camera. People will know what the photographer's cameras look like, and they have a little digital screen. You don't see it in great detail, but we knew this is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph has been gotten.
Yeah, as soon as it came in. And of course, look, the newsrooms aren't as busy as they used to be. They used to be very busy, buzzy places with phones ringing everywhere. And it felt like a proper newsroom that day. I remember everybody's phone was going. People were hearing little bits about it. The news was starting to break about it. And of course, we were there sitting in the office with this photo. There's that sort of news sense in you that you want to run this.
Yeah.
And at the time, we weren't putting stuff up online. This would have been held for the paper on the Sunday. And this is a Friday afternoon. We had something really special here. But we also, I think, knew the guards were going to be desperate for that picture because they were two gunmen running from a scene of a crime. So it was a very compromised situation and there was a bit of arguments going on and there was voices were raised.
Totally. I mean, because it is complex. I mean, normally the journalism likes to keep itself separate from the Gardaí investigations. So Garda investigations go on and journalism reports on them. But obviously then you're put in this compromising position because you have guys running out visibly with handguns in their hands. And, they're obviously then disappeared into the ether. And you have to have a discussion about what is your civic responsibility in terms of Do you help the guards? You don't want these armed gunmen to run down the street and kill another few people? So it was a complex one, and people were aware straight away that the guards are going to want these pictures and want to use it for their purposes. And we also have our purposes, which is to tell what happened and to report on the news. So there was a conflict straight away.
From my memory, as the afternoon went on and, I was talking to contacts and to other people who were involved in crime journalism, etc., it became apparent that there were no guards at the weigh-in. That in actual fact, the guards didn't seem to be there at all. They were called literally by the hotel and had arrived in response to what had already gone on. Of course, David Byrne had been shot dead in the reception of the hotel. We were getting photographs in later in the day, which showed a very shocked-looking Liam Byrne standing outside the hotel, his hands in his pockets, standing beside his cousin Liam Rowe, another significant cartel member. There was no sign of Daniel Kinahan. I was getting calls from people who were telling me that these professional killers had been flown into the country and had already been flown out. There was rumours, there was spin, and also there was the general, I suppose, conversations in regards to, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I mean, all anyone knew for sure was something was going to happen. David Byrne was a very, very senior lieutenant. He was also from criminal royalty, from the Byrne family. His brother-in-law is Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. His brother is Liam Byrne, and he's very much at the heart of the Kinahan cartel. We knew from the beginning that this attack had occurred as part of the rivalry between the Kinahan and Hutch factions of what was once the one organisation. And I think everybody was really trying to predict what this might lead to, but nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. And of course, those rumours straight away went around. It was straight away focused on the Hutch gang. But at this time, if you remember, while there had been other incidents, for example, an attempted hit on Jerry Hutch in Lanzarote, those incidents weren't always public. People were straight away thinking this isn't the type of normal organised crime operation. They were looking at the weapons, saying, is there a paramilitary organisation involved here? Nobody knew fully. And of course, what people did fear straight away was, no matter what, people knew how big and how powerful the Kinahans had become, and the likelihood of them not striking back was inevitable. That blood was going to flow.
That bit absolutely 100%. But at that very early stage, I recall contacts of mine suggesting that the Hutches were an army. Did they have the backing of the dissidents? Was this going to, were they going to be very heavily armed because of that? They had contacts in the north. It was like as if people were trying to size up how two Premiership teams were going to play against one another. That's what it felt like. You've been listening to an extract from The Regency, 10 years on from the hit that changed Gangland forever. Visit crimeworld.com and subscribe to hear the full series now. And you'll also get exclusive access to our other podcast deep dives on the Dapper Don, Christy Kinahan, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and more.